Good morning. My name is Marcus Iannozzi, and this is
Tara Kingsley.
And we're going to talk to you today about it's a case study primarily about the John Carter Brown Library's website. And one of the reasons we think this is an interesting case study and relevant to camps is because there's a pretty sophisticated content strategy in order to achieve some of the goals that the library was looking to do with a complete refresh of their brand and really who they were reaching out to. And Drupal was a great tool to do this because of what it offers us out of the box from the perspective of content types and taxonomy and node reference. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. First, I just want to introduce myself. So, again, I'm Marcus Iannozzi. I'm the founder and principal of Message Agency. We are a full-service digital agency in Philadelphia. We're also a B Corporation. Does anybody know what a B Corp is? No? All right, I'm not going into it. But we're certified as a triple bottom line business, and we operate a little bit more like a social enterprise than a for-profit entity. And we work only with nonprofits, universities, foundations, and government. Tara?
And the John Carter Brown Library is a rare book library and research institution across town. It's located on Brown University's campus. And we like to say that we are a 19th century institution with a 21st century mission, meaning that the collection itself started as the private collection of a man in 1846 and is now world-renowned book library, rare book library that has over 50,000 volumes, and we're actually digitizing everything, and that's the 21st century mission part of it, to make our collection accessible.
Tara, do you want to talk about your role?
Sure. I am the assistant director for academic programming and fellowships, so we host lectures and other things that are supposed to draw people into the library to engage with the scholarship that is created through people's research in the collection. And we also invite around 50 fellows to come and do research every year. So we have very set ways of bringing people into the library and having specific constituents engage. I work with those groups mostly, and then I also do some communications work, which is how I was brought into this project.
So if you're here in the Providence area, check it out, because they have some really, really interesting, great collection, great library, but interesting events. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to ask really quickly to get a sense of the audience. Who here is from a university or an independent library? One person? Anyone in the middle of a website redesign or considering Drupal? Okay. How many developers do we have in the audience? Wow. Okay. You guys are not going to be as excited about this presentation, but all right. We'll do what we can. And anyone in program, admin, marketing staff, designers. Okay, great. Just helps to know who we're talking to. So we want to talk about the challenge here for this institution. And as Tara was saying, the JCB, even the title of this presentation is a little, a little academic. So we've got this really amazing library, and it was, trying to figure out how to become more relevant to not only a contemporary audience, but a much broader audience that it, had been reaching previously. So, Tara, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Once the library became a public library open to anyone who had a question about the Americas, who's looking for an answer in our collection, really what happened is we started focusing on researchers, advanced researchers who had some experience with either archival work or had topics that were related to our collection's themes and time period. Since I'd say maybe the past 10 years, I think we've been expanding more into an undergraduate audience, a non-local audience, and an audience that's not academic or not specialists in the areas that we're concerned with.
And just so it's clear, this research collection is sort of pre-Columbian to 1825. That's the sort of delineation. So really, not only rare books, but much older. And I think part of the challenge was thinking through, how do you take something that is sort of much older and make it timely. And the reason we have this picture up here, this is Phyllis Wheatley. She was a slave, and she was also, though, a poet and a published poet in the 1700s. And this library has this volume and others by Phyllis Wheatley. So there are things, and there are books on the slave trade. There are books on that talk about colonization. And researchers increasingly are looking at these again and thinking about how what happened then and what was documented really impacts, whether it's culture, language, and other things that we have today. So a little bit about two views of JCB. So this is what you see when you look at the library. It's pretty imposing. It's this this stone edifice. It's not really open. It was known only to a small set of stakeholders, as Tara said, but again, its work was pretty relevant. It was closed off physically. One of our staff members who worked on this project was a Brown undergrad and walked by this building every day and had no idea what was in it and what it was.
Our director was also a Brown undergrad and never came into the library as an undergrad, which is a story we hear over and over again.
Yeah, it's just pretty ironic. And then also the relationship to the university is very unclear. There's no signs, there's no, it's both an institution that's on the campus but also somewhat independent and affiliated with the university. This was the other view. This was pre-redesign, and the online presence was just as obscuring, really, in many ways, because it was pretty just simple. It really did not engage folks about the content that was available. It also, had no way to highlight the incredible. I mean, these books are. You'll see some photos as we go, but the books are just incredible and intricate and hand drawn and beautiful, beautiful volumes. So there were things that were just not able to be brought to light. It was inflexible. It wasn't responsive. It was also, wasn't it part of the university's?
It was. Yeah. It was a brown.edu/facilities/academics/libraries. So that was confusing.
So everything was buried. Is really the goal. So the opportunity is what sort of led to this transformation. It was a very pivotal moment in the library's evolution. There was fresh leadership. As well as new staff with different perspectives and a rebrand. And Tara, do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So our director, when he began his position about 6 years ago, recognized that our website wasn't serving us and that we'd be able to communicate what we were doing and share our mission much more effectively with website redesign. And part of that, too, was a rebrand, which I'll mention because these were treated sort of as separate but related projects. Our website was more than a decade old, and I don't think that we had ever had a really definitive moment where we determined what our brand would be. And so we worked with a different agency to refine who we were trying to reach and what our brand should be, and then turned that into our conversation with Message Agency. But it was really Neil, the director's acknowledgement that this was two processes that needed to happen and that they should happen at the same time.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the project strategies, around this notion of reinventing the brand of the library, making it far more accessible, but most importantly, thinking through who are the new audiences that the library is trying to reach, and how can a site serve both actually the general public or just sort of occasional people who are interested in that part of history or looking at genealogy or other things. How could the site also serve them and academic audiences at the same time? That's a big challenge, but we found a good way to do it. So some of the ways we did it, one was translating this sort of key experience that fellows had and extend that to everyone else. So fellows are able to, just sort of roam the stacks and explore and make connections, not just do research, but they're really able to explore. And so we wanted to reproduce that experience for the site visitor. you want to say anything about that?
Well, when fellows research, they're sitting in our reading room, which is just 2 tables and 16 chairs, and they're surrounded by some of the volumes that are they're the real books, you know. So it's really being immersed in the collection and also having access to specialists who work in the same building as you. All of our collections are on site, which means that all of the JCB's operations, from digitization to the collection itself to the curators and catalogers, it's all happening in the building.
And we also wanted to, again, expand access to the collection with new technology. So JCB is doing a major digitization effort. I don't know what percentage, well, we won't talk about that. But, you know, making them able to sort of take the results of that digitization and feature that information on the site. You know, also they're investing in a new interactive platform to showcase their dams, and you know, this version of the site doesn't have that integration, but we're looking eventually at, you know, maybe connecting that and being able to pull actual assets into the site. Another is you know, creating more local spaces on the site and, you know, making it accessible to the community. That's really everything that Tara is doing in her role. But with that sort of imposing edifice and not a lot of information, people weren't coming to events. Another is, you know, disseminating knowledge with more public-facing and interpretive programming and content, exhibitions, talks, etc. Also promoting more sort of innovative and experimental work. So the JCB does a lot of interesting collaborations with other institutions, and that was also obscured. And also increasing support for underrepresented scholars, and that was something that the library is doing in general, but we wanted the site to also emphasize, whether that was in content or, as you'll see, in sort of the personas that we embodied for this. And, you know, also then increasing outreach to Latin American communities. This is all of these, the whole collection is about the Americas. So it's North America, Central America, and South America during that time period. So there's a range of stakeholders geographically. And then encouraging dialogue, sort of repositioning the institution as autonomous from Brown, but, you know, also talking a little bit about its legacy. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. So I think if you see how our website was oriented in the past, we talked a lot about the legacy and the historical, you know, the origins of the library, which makes sense for our environment, but I don't think is relevant or necessarily interesting to a lot of people. So we wanted to give people the information that they needed to understand where the library is coming from, but more importantly, show people what we're doing today. And we are located at Brown, but we are autonomous, semi-autonomous. And we wanted to highlight that, but we also wanted to show the ways that we work with departments at Brown, with undergraduate students, with graduate students, and other faculty members. So we wanted to show the independent side, but also the ways that we are very much a part of the scholarly community at Brown.
So a little bit about the design approach. We just want to talk about some of the key tools that we used. One of the things that, this is a very simple tool for user research that we use. It's called the top tasks analysis. It's a very simple survey that has one question, and it has a litany of things that someone might do on a site. And it gets sent out to stakeholders, and they're just asked, select the top 3 things that you want from this website. It's super simple, but it's tremendously powerful when you do the analysis, because you can kind of group what the audience is telling you, you know, is important. And it's been really, really helpful for us, and it was really helpful here, you know, because we realized that, you know, upcoming events was actually ranked kind of high, and that surprised us. But it was also extremely helpful in saying, yes, we can, you know, make this feel more local, and it makes sense for this audience. Another thing that we did, and everybody I'm sure in this room has encountered personas, but we did an extensive set of personas, you know, to really think through not just the current audiences, because JCB knew its academic audience very, very well, but it did not know other audiences as well, and thinking through potentially what an aspirational audience wants from you is challenging. If we had, more time or more budget, we probably would have done more direct user research to inform the personas. But right now, all we had was sort of what we knew and a little bit of independent, just sort of desk research to figure that out. But it definitely helped us. And we had, personas that ranged from, sort of the supporters and fellows, which are typical, the undergrad, international partner, but also the artist, collectors, someone who is, Latinx and underrepresented in the U.S., an underrepresented user in the U.S., and thinking about how this site might be relevant to that person, as well as someone who is in Latin America and doing other types of research. The content strategy is really where... Yeah.
Is it okay to...
Yes, of course. Please interrupt us. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Overall, around how many personas would you say you guys had in total for a project like this? I mean, it doesn't have to be like an exact...
We had 9.
9?
9.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Neil, who's the director, wanted more. And we kind of rolled that back a little bit. Tara was helping us do that. But yeah, we tried to embody, with personas, sometimes it's not just the number you have. Sometimes you can collapse different perspectives into one persona and just at least address, someone with that need. We find ways of having economy there. So the content strategy, I think, is really the most interesting part of this site, and where Drupal is most relevant to this conversation. I think for site builders, it's really cool because it has a lot of the content model is very interconnected, from themes to collection items to to exhibitions, and all of these things interrelate because we wanted this to feel more like discovery. And we wanted to prioritize, the user's experience immediately as discovery over research. The researchers and the academics know exactly what they're looking for. We made it easy for them to get there, but we prioritized this notion of exploration. Another thing we did was sort of, demonstrate how the collection was more relevant using metadata. And using metadata in a smarter way, letting the taxonomy and the metadata tell the story instead of words, and using that coupled with images to grab someone's attention and then have them dig deeper if they found interest. And then finally, another is a more flexible architecture. So we used paragraphs pretty extensively in this site to give Tara. As you can tell, the last site was not flexible at all. And we used paragraphs pretty extensively on the homepage, on landing pages. I don't think they're on, some sort of nodes, but they're available to her to really recreate things as she needs. I don't know if you want to talk about that flexibility.
Yeah, the flexibility was really helpful because there are times at certain points of the year where we have initiatives or an appeal going on or fellowship applications, and we'd want to add more or less content. So that was genius.
Well, I don't know if it was genius, just good practice.
It's good practice.
Good practice. So then a little bit about technical approach for some of the devs in the room. Again, look, I'm the principal, so I'm not going to be able to go too deeply. But paragraphs and more paragraphs and more paragraphs is something that we did emphasize. And images. The site became very, very image heavy, and I can pull it up just to kind of give you guys a sense of, oh man, I'm going to have to, here we go. This is so difficult to do. There we go. So just to give you a sense of what the site looks like today, just a really, really quick overview. We definitely emphasized images here. And this is something that we have to evaluate with every client, because a content strategy like this if the images aren't powerful, the entire site fails. And that was one of the first conversations that we had. This is a great way to engage. Images. People, I think it's we process images 60,000 times faster than text, which is why they're so powerful as an element on a page. But if they're fuzzy and they're not interesting, the entire strategy fails. So JCB actually invested in some pretty amazing photography. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, through our rebranding process, we identified that color, full-scale photography would be a major part of our communication strategy. And the group that we work with recommended a local photographer who came in and basically took all the pictures you see here. We had not been accumulating, like a good number of quality photographs in the past. So this was all work that was done over the course of our website redesign.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite ones, actually. This actually was done in the 1500s, and those are all independent wheels that are sort of tied, and you can turn them. It's like a cosmology, and you can turn. It's just really, we had so much fun with this. I think the one thing that we learned that's helpful is making sure that website homepages are extremely flexible. And this is sort of the site in their homepage in its simplest form, its recommended form going out of the gate. But the site itself in the admin gives them the ability to go ahead and add bands. This is the interface for the homepage. And because we made it paragraphs based, it's super simple. They can add bands and drag and drop and rearrange them. It takes a little bit of thought with the theming to make sure that if bands are two different types of bands are stacked, are they going to is the spacing going to work? Are they going to kind of align properly? But it's a strategy we've been using, and administrators love it. Some administrators go a little crazy with it. So we've had some clients who will do 16 story bands, and we try to help them not do that. We don't limit it, but with great power comes great responsibility, and they're getting used to having that kind of freedom. Some of the other ways that we used bands, we just sort of went through this, but this is an actual custom band we did, which is called a collection carousel, and this allows the administrator to pull in different collection sets. And we're going to go into what collection sets are in a minute. But it really allows them to curate all of these different collection items according to themes. And then they can feature them here as new ones are curated. And then we also created a views container, a band that allows you to pull in existing views. And that's also really flexible for a lot of our clients. So that's just a quick preview. And I also showed you that if we weren't doing a demo, so we did that. I think this is where the story really gets told about the architecture. Tara, do you want to talk about how you guys are using collection sets?
Sure. Yeah, so on our last website, as you saw, we didn't prioritize our collection. It was much more oriented towards the researcher. We wanted to let people see what our collection looks like if you're seeing it, a foot in front of you. So what we did is we selected a number of items, I think maybe about 130, that are somehow representative of the collection or that are some of our most important items. And then we described them, we photographed them, and then we tagged them by genre, theme, period, language, and place, I think. So.
And periods, yeah.
And periods.
Yeah. And this was the strategy I was mentioning before around metadata, because you could get a sense just from those tags and looking at the items that are arrayed under those tags what the JCB was about and what its collection represented. and telling a story and giving some context to that. It also allows the user to figure out, well, what's more relevant to me? Am I interested in a particular theme? Am I interested in a different place in the Americas? Is there a period of time that I find of interest? And they're getting to what they want more immediately. This is, when you click on the collection, this is the landing page. So you're immediately, the items are immediately surfaced and can be all explored on this page. And then that first tab, which is Discover, I believe that's random. And so it'll just randomly pull every time I don't know if it's session-based or if it's page load. I can't remember that level of detail, but it will reshuffle what's there to make the experience new. I think if that's... Yeah, I think
the idea here is really to create the serendipity of finding something in the collection, which is actually a little bit more advanced than how researchers experience this in the library. You don't just stumble upon a book that's open on a table. You have to know what you're looking for, request it, and then see it. Here, we just laid everything out for people. So it's great for people who don't know what we are and aren't, specialists in the early Americas, but it's also great for people who are researchers but have focused on a narrow area of the collection and want to know what else is at the library.
So just really quickly, that last bullet point, this was a technical challenge that we ran into, which was these highlights can belong to multiple taxonomy terms, so they can be tagged, and they can also appear in multiple sets. So part of the challenge here was if you're viewing, a node that has multiple terms and it's in a collection, then you don't know what context it's in. Right? There's a challenge because there's multiple contexts that one node sits in, and this is a classic Drupal challenge that we've had. And so, how would you navigate back if I sort of drilled down into a collection set and I'm looking at one of the items? How do I navigate back to the same set that I was looking at? And I'm sure our developers can explain this a lot better, but they used a parameter. Which is the taxonomy term parameter there in the URL in order to remember where the user was, and that was a customization we did to fix that. That's been again a challenge that we've in other places. Any other questions about this? Yeah.
So this is specifically the highlights. You said you had about 130 or so, but according to the top there, it says that there's 50,000 rare books. Does the website feature all 50,000 in there, or just the highlights, and then that's going to drive foot traffic into the place? Yes.
You can get from the item to the MARC record. You can go up under research, and as an academic, get immediately to the catalog that you're looking for, the digital platform. You're looking for images, so you can get there directly. You can get there through the highlights. In this phase, we were really focused on the experience. Later, we may see that are there ways to sort of integrate, the images and the dams and MARC records and other things directly into the site. But that's a much
and our plan is to add to this regularly. So based off of current initiatives, or if we acquire something new that's really interesting, we can highlight it here. But this isn't supposed to be the place that people go to research. It's just supposed to orient them.
And again, it's an example of how we prioritized exploration and curation over direct research. Okay. And so this is just an example of the collection sets. When you do click on one of those taxonomies, you get a series of sets that relate to that taxonomy. You then click on it. You're in that set. And you see that they're actually able to feature items, and then they're also able to relate, other items to this. So the layout actually continues to promote browsing if you don't see anything of interest there. And this is what a collection item looks like. You can see the metadata on the right there. You can also see the related content to this. That's related by the admin. That's using a node reference. So that's another way that the administrator can curate this experience. And two items might not be related by a term, but there's something about their those two things that might be of interest, sort of a see also. And so there's the ability to do that if needed. And I believe the MARC record's over there somewhere. I can't see.
Yeah, there's a link to the catalog, and then a lot of these items are already digitized, so there's a link to that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The real sort of cornerstone of the site is also exhibitions. Tara, do you want to talk about how you all use exhibitions?
So we've curated dozens of exhibitions over the past few decades. A lot of them were already described on our website, but a lot of them were not converted into a digital exhibition. So for the ones that hadn't been converted to a digital exhibition, we used the exhibitions template that Message Agency created for us. There's a lot of back work that goes into this, and so some of the exhibitions that we curated did have a digital version, and for now we have links to the old exhibition site. But our plan is to convert everything to Message Agency's template.
Yeah, I mean, previously, JCB was creating a new website for every single online exhibition that they they wanted to create or they were being funded to create. And, this is also, we work with a lot of libraries, and this is always sort of the holy grail, like how can we have something that's easy enough for us to sort of build within the site, but is robust enough that it lets us, give interpretive information. It's not just like a slideshow of images and some captions. Mm-hmm. And so what we came up with was it's a pretty robust. It's very long form. So there's some challenges with it. There's still things about this that I think we want to refine with JCB, because once this was designed, and then we didn't have the content necessarily when it was designed. And so what's happened is there's a lot of text. And so we want to work with, because some of these exhibition pages are super, super long. And so there's sections, and then within each section there's slides. And so you can kind of browse within a section. There's the ability to have interpretive information on the left for each of the slides, interpretive information for the section. And you can imagine this gets pretty long. So we're trying to think through some ways of changing this UI.
And I think part of it too is our mindset about how we write and who our audience is. These, for example, would be the same labels that would go into our physical exhibition in the library. So one thing that we can do too is change the way that we approach online exhibitions. Maybe it's a condensed format. Maybe it's a skeleton version.
A lot of words. A lot of words. But we're getting there. So in terms of implementation, this actually uses the layout discovery module. I don't know, has anyone heard of that? It also, we heavily use display suite, actually, where, I know there's lots of different ways to construct layouts in Drupal, but we found it to be just really helpful, really flexible, and we've been using Bootstrap pretty extensively too, and just found that it's those have worked well together. The full page displays, though, we had to do custom layouts for, so there is some custom templating, but for the most part, we the sort of foundational parts of the site we were able to use the display suite. All right, and then some lessons learned. The first one, which we just mentioned, is sort of tackling the content problem first. We have a practice of giving our clients kind of this spreadsheet at the very, very beginning of the project, where we ask them to do a content audit and to take their existing content and kind of, and really assess it. What is on the site now? What goals does it relate to, if at all? Because probably the content, written years ago may not actually relate to the goals as the institution currently defines them. What audiences does that content relate to? Are they audiences that are being prioritized? What's the state of this content? Who's responsible for it? And then ultimately, what's the migration path? And often, that audit is able to inform our content strategy, because we can see what's being deprecated as soon as possible in the design phase. But what I think in this case would have helped, especially with the exhibitions, is actually getting samples. Like, even if the client didn't have that sort of that content already written, asking what is this going to look like, and try to do one and tell us what this needs to have. I think we had some assumptions from some of the sites and other things that were already created, and I think that would have changed our design approach. Also, saving technical challenges for a later phase. So this, like most projects that we work on, has a limited budget, right? We only work with nonprofits, universities, foundations, some government. And as a result, that line item is that line item, and we can't go back to the well. So we've got to figure out how to do a project in a way that is, there's quality and there's value, but it meets the budget for everyone's interests. So, one of the things going into this project that I think the director wanted was, what you all mentioned. Well, is this integrated with the dams? And, what's sort of the, what are the bells and whistles? Can we unify search? It was just a lot of asks that were very big technically. And a lot of libraries have not figured out how to do, much less us in that budget. So, we were able to, with Tara's help, I think, too, because what did you say the other day that a lot of the things that were asked for would have not only made our job harder, but her job harder. So we were able to lobby and say, look, let's sort of right size this, and let's focus on the UX and the sort of audience need, and get that up and running and iterate later. Trying to prove yourself wrong. I think, when did this launch? It was maybe 3 months ago, 4 months ago?
Yeah, September, officially October.
Okay. I mean, it's pretty new. And one of the things that we've been talking about with Tara is, some of the metrics and measures that we defined early in the project. Like, what are the goals for this? How would you measure it? Actually now trying, 3 months out and 6 months out and a year out, looking at those metrics and seeing, like, what didn't we do well and how can we improve? I think there's a set it and forget it kind of tendency, especially, this is a lot of work. It was a lot of work for everyone, and everyone was just, okay, it's gone, it's launched, I can exhale and I can go do something else and focus on my day job, but we're losing an opportunity to actually take, the data that the site and the analytics gives us and improving certain aspects of it. And then the other part is make things easy to change if it turns out you are wrong. And we try to build sites with that in mind. We try to build them in very modular ways, so that's why the paragraph approach has been interesting for us, because we've been able to, abstract the types of paragraphs that a site might need, or across sites what administrators tend to need, and build and design in a modular way. And I think that's just a best practice. It's nothing revolutionary that we're doing, but I don't know if it always happens. Sometimes there's shortcuts that folks take just to sort of get something out the door, and we've seen that often in the support cycle, where we have people kind of reaching out to us saying, hey, we've got this site, we don't want to work with our vendor anymore, will you support it? And we look under the hood, and it's just something that's really, really hard to extend, and it's also hard to support because of that. So we try to be mindful. We're not always successful, but we try to be mindful of that, because we are supporting most of the sites that we build. We don't just offer them. So I think, is there anything else you want to add, Tara?
Well, just from the clients, and our website was over a decade old, and we determined pretty quickly that 90% of the content on it wouldn't be migrating. But I think the second hurdle we had to cross was, changing our mindset about what a website should look at, should look like. And we looked at a lot of different examples from other institutions, including libraries, research centers, and museums, because we are sort of a combination of all of those things. And I think something we learned was that, it's okay not to have your new site map onto your old site, or vice versa. It's okay to just make it look completely different. we did.
Yeah, it definitely does. Any questions from folks? Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what was the old site built on?
Was it Drupal?
It was Drupal.
It was Drupal, yeah, but it was part of the university's site. Like it was actually, I would say pages and a section of the site at a URL that I think it redirected.
It redirected.
JCBL,
It was jcbl.org, but it redirected to a brown.edu site.
Yeah.
The reason I asked, if I could just do a quick follow-up, is our library right now is going through a sort of a digitization initiative to try to put a lot of research online, and they went through the process. They decided to go with Hyrax, and the project, because it's like you said, it's really good for research and all the legal aspects of it. So when things are embargoed and so on and so forth. But I'm finding that I got pulled in like last minute after I made the decision. They lost a developer to help out, and it's horribly documented, and apparently it's really niche. So I was wondering if you guys had looked at any of these like library type like Hyrax or Samvera or anything like that.
No.
Yeah. Just.
Whether there's another hand, yeah.
In terms of the design process, so was the message agency design and build for the? Okay, so the branding initiative was more around messaging and.
Yeah, it was more. The brand was more sort of like defining new audiences, the logo, and color scheme, and like the approach to photography. So we did the information architecture. We actually did the visual design for the site, just drawing on the brand and the build. Yeah.
So in that process, you say you're a part of Brown, but not, but independent as well. Did Brown's brand and visual brand influence the site design, or were you able to steer like?
We were able to steer clear of that.
That's cool.
Right. That's
that was cool.
If it was a Brown site, it would not probably.
And same for our rebranding too. We looked at the color red, which is in Brown's logo, and thought, do we want to look more associated with Brown or less?
So interesting, like decision points then. Internally, did you want to be associated with Brown, or
Well, I mean, for example, there we also saw that a lot of our peer institutions used red as a complementary color, and we didn't necessarily want to fold into that. Once we determined that photography would be a major part of our communication strategy, we wanted simpler shades of like gray and black.
Yeah, I think where you're going really with this is there are a series of extremely bold choices here for a very old institution, and we had a lot of discussions about what that relationship to Brown was going to be like, and I think Neil Seffier, who's the executive director, was very his leadership there was really crucial to the success of this project. I don't think it would be as compelling a site if he hadn't been willing to make those bold choices and kind of stand behind them, and pay for the photography that was going to. I mean, it was
that was to me a comment, more of a comment, but it's so
important,
wonderful as an agency to get to work with a customer who has digital or any assets that are just visually appealing. Kind of unlocks a new level, especially when you're developing websites that are just, and then you get to that phase and you're like, okay, stock photography, and like you said earlier, it's like the whole thing just kind of.
Yeah, we have a client like that who we've tried to use images. Sparingly, maybe not as extensive as here, but you want that's what engages users, and there's a lot of stock, and it doesn't do it. Yeah, it's tough.
Nice job.
Yeah, thank you. It was a wonderful partnership. Any other questions or comments? Great. All right, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. No questions.